Hello everybody. The term BMS is something which is often heard nowadays. What is a BMS? Is it something which is absolutely required when it is used on a lithium-ion battery pack? Why is it required? Why was it not used on lead-acid batteries for all these years? Does it mean that it is absolutely essential in the case of lithium-ion batteries? These are some of the questions which are asked by various people nowadays, especially when they inquire about batteries or talk about a lithium-ion battery. And in fact, nowadays a lot of people are asking for a BMS for lead-acid batteries too. So let's understand what's a BMS. The full form of BMS is Battery Management System. It is also called BHMS because it means Battery Health Management System. Now, this BMS is something which is absolutely required for a lithium-ion battery, and it is very unsafe to use a lithium-ion battery without coupling it to a BMS. So, what are some of the good features or features of a good BMS? A good BMS must incorporate BTMS. What is BTMS? BTMS is Battery Thermal Management System. It indicates unusual heating up or a possible thermal runaway. A good BMS must not be based only on voltage feedback. It must indicate the correct state of charge based on the residual capacity. And this is important because the residual capacity in the battery gives an indication and controls the charger in a manner that the charging is based on this residual capacity. It must indicate the energy, the kWh delivered in each cycle. Again, this also gives an indication to the charger of what was the charge taken out from the battery and what is the charge to be put into the battery. And in the case of lithium ion, because opportunity charging is allowed, this becomes a very important function, and a good BMS must have this capability. It must be also able to measure the coolant flow. In case of EVs, what happens is the battery is cooled, and this coolant flow also has to be indicated by a good BMS. It must be able to protect the battery because that is the main function of the BMS. It has to protect the battery and act as an interface between the battery and the user to keep the battery user or the vehicle user safe. Naturally, it must have predictive capabilities and give alerts as and when necessary. For all this, it has to have good components. So the MOSFETs and ICs used have to be of a very good quality. A good BMS must be rugged to handle the energy coming back as regenerative energy into the battery. Now let's see what are the types of BMS. There are three main types of BMS. One is a hardware BMS, and one is a smart BMS, and the third one is a IoT enabled BMS. Let's see what is the difference in all these types of BMS. In the hardware BMS, it is pre-configured at the manufacturing stage. It has got cell balancing and cell protection features. Of course, these are the basic features which are absolutely required, and these are provided in the hardware BMS. In the smart BMS, the BMS has got the cell balancing and cell protection features, of course, whatever is available in the hardware BMS. This can also be pre-configured and set in the factory, but the additional facility is it can be also set, the parameters of this BMS can be altered at site. For this, it uses a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Naturally, the setting can be done within the range of the Wi-Fi, and this setting will have to be done at site. The third type of BMS is an IoT enabled BMS. This has got cell protection features and cell balancing features. It can also be pre-configured and supplied to the customer. But in case any parameters need to be changed, it can be changed at site or by remote operation because it has got a GPRS plus SIM card. And In case the customer needs, it is possible to make it GPS compatible so that cloud monitoring and live tracking is possible. The usage can be monitored, and it is even possible to immobilize the vehicle battery using a software. Now, let's see what are the main functions of the BMS. The main functions of the BMS, the first one of course is to ensure that the battery is not overcharged. So there has to be a charge current limit. The second thing is it must have a short circuit protection with a safe cutoff. The third point is it must have sensors and a thermal cutoff facility. This is very important in the case of lithium ion because these batteries have a tendency for getting heated up, and once even a few cells or one cell gets heated up, it heats up the next cell and the entire battery becomes so hot that it either can explode or catch fire. So this is a very, very important function of the BMS to ensure that the BMS has a thermal cutoff facility. Now it must be able to cut off charging to some fully charged cells. When the battery is being charged, there is a possibility that some cells are almost fully charged and some cells are lagging behind. The cells which are lagging behind need to be fully charged, and a balancing has to take place. Like I mentioned, cell balancing is one of the features of a BMS and one of the functions of a BMS. So what happens is the cells all have to be equally charged, and so it must cut off the charging to some fully charged cells and continue the charging for the cells which are lagging. It must ensure the battery is not over discharged, because over discharge is as dangerous as overcharge, especially in the case of a lithium ion battery. It must have a real-time clock, because most of the BMS have a data logging facility, and when the data logging takes place, the time stamping is an essential part of data logging. So the RTC or the real-time clock is an absolute necessary in the case of a BMS. It must have range indication in case of EV, because most of the EV owners have something known as a range anxiety, and the battery has a tendency known as capacity fade. And because of this, the vehicle BMS, the BMS used in vehicles have to have the range indication facility. It must have equalization charge mode for cell balancing. This I have already explained to you that the cell balancing is an important feature, and the lagging cells have to be balanced and brought up. So this facility of equalizing charge is an absolute must. And of course, it must provide alerts of unusual occurrences. Now these were the functions of the BMS. Now we come to see what is a limitation of the BMS. One of the major limitations of a BMS is that the battery management system as well as the sensors which are connected to the battery, they have a limited role to play as soon as the battery goes into a thermal runaway mode, and they are ineffective. They are unable to stop this reaction or this phenomena of the lithium ion battery, and this thermal runaway mode, which happens due to an electrical short or fault inside the cell or the cells, is something which the BMS is unable to control. So you see that the use of a BMS is an absolute must in the case of lithium ion batteries. It can be used for lead acid batteries too to get a better performance. Hope this information provided by me was useful to you. Thank you.
Please do visit www.rameshnatarajan.in. You may contact us by writing to rameshnkailad@gmail.com, rameshnkailad@gmail.com. Keep yourself updated about our new releases by hitting the subscribe button.